In Mashonaland East, Solomon Mujuru, known to the world as the indomitable Rex Nhongo, stood as a colossus among men. Born Solomon Mutawesva on May 1, 1949, in the humble village of Chivu, his early life was a tapestry woven from the threads of colonial oppression and quiet defiance. As a boy, he watched white farmers till the fertile soils that his ancestors had once claimed, their tractors humming like distant thunder while black laborers bent double in the fields. The early seeds of anti-colonial fury were sown in the stark economic realities of the Rhodesian colony. Education at Zamudo High School was brief. Activism drew him in at a young age, landing him in a Rhodesian prison in 1966 for 2 years on charges of subversion. Released into a world seething with unrest, Mujuru crossed into Zambia in 1968, joining the Zimbabwe African People's Union, ZANU-PF, under Joshua Nkomo. However, the deep ideological and tribal fractures within the nationalist movement drew him toward the rival Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, in 1971, where he adopted the nom de guerre Rex Nhongo, a name that would echo through the bush like a war cry, signifying ruthlessness and command. The Rhodesian Bush War, that brutal crucible from 1964 to 1979, forged Nhongo into legend. At 19, he infiltrated back into Rhodesia, commanding a unit of the Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army, ZANLA, ZANU's armed wing. His operations were surgical strikes of terror, ambushes on convoys, sabotage of rail lines, and raids on isolated farms that left white settlers whispering his name in dread. By 1976, as ZANU and ZANU-PF formed the Uneasy Patriotic Front Alliance, Nhongo rose to co-commander of the Zimbabwe People's Army, overseeing infiltration routes and operational planning. This period was the most critical for Robert Mugabe's ascent. When Mugabe was released from prison in 1974, ZANU was in disarray. The official leader, Ndabaningi Sithole, was losing influence, and a group of young, educated, and radical commanders, the Vashandi or Workers faction, within ZANLA camps were challenging the entire old guard and the existing political structure. Mugabe, a politician who had spent a decade in detention, had no direct military base or proven command experience among the fighting forces. His political survival and ultimate rise hinged entirely on the men who controlled the guns. Nhongo's loyalty to Mugabe was ironclad and ultimately decisive. He personally smuggled the future president out of Rhodesia to Mozambique, defying Rhodesian and Zambian security forces in the process. More critically, he used his massive influence and control over the rank-and-file soldiers to ensure that the ZANLA forces, the engine of the revolution, accepted Mugabe as their supreme political leader. The Mgago Declaration of 1975 provided the political mechanism to depose Sithole, but it was Nhongo who, alongside Josiah Tongogara, physically held ZANLA's fractured command together. Crucially, in 1978, Nhongo crushed a major internal dissent aimed at removing Mugabe, confirming his status as the indispensable kingmaker. This act secured Mugabe's leadership but also established a permanent, uneasy power dynamic. Mugabe controlled the political party, but Mujuru controlled the loyalty of the army. He was the only man capable of a military coup, an unspoken reality that both men understood. Independence in 1980 crowned him Zimbabwe's first black army commander. At 31, Nhongo, now Solomon Mujuru, faced the Herculean task of integrating 20,000 ex-ZANLA and Zipper fighters with 12,000 Rhodesian security forces into the Zimbabwe National Army, ZNA. Ethnic tensions simmered. Zipper cadres, mostly Ndebele, eyed their Shona-dominated ZANLA counterparts with suspicion. Mujuru navigated this minefield with a blend of coercion and conciliation, quelling mutinies and purging dissidents. Yet, whispers persisted of his role in darker chapters. During the Gukurahundi massacres of the 1980s, when Mugabe's North Korean-trained 5th Brigade unleashed horror on Matabeleland, killing up to 20,000 civilians, Mujuru's army provided logistical support. He later distanced himself, portraying the events as regrettable excesses, but the bloodstains lingered on his uniform. Publicly, he retired in 1992, stepping into the shadows of business. Vast farms like Alamine and Beatrice, mining stakes in chrome-rich Midlands, transport empires, and tourism ventures that swelled his fortune to billions. This vast patronage network gave him unparalleled political leverage, establishing him as the ultimate power broker behind ZANU-PF's electoral machine. Privately, he wielded influence as ZANU-PF's unspoken kingmaker, a member of parliament for Chikomba, and the husband of Joyce Mujuru, the guerrilla fighter turned vice president in 2004. By the late 2000s, Zimbabwe teetered on the abyss. Hyperinflation had rendered the Zimbabwean dollar worthless. Bread cost wheelbarrows of cash, and Mugabe's land reforms, seizing white farms for redistribution, had collapsed agriculture, sparking famine. The global political agreement of 2008, brokered by South Africa's Thabo Mbeki, installed Morgan Tsvangirai's Movement for Democratic Change, MDC, as a power-sharing partner, but ZANU-PF hardliners chafed at sharing power with the opposition. Mujuru emerged as the party's moderate anchor. He became the de facto leader of the reformist faction within ZANU-PF, advocating for a pragmatic shift away from Mugabe's radical, anti-Western rhetoric. Unlike the securocrats, generals like Constantine Chiwenga and Emmanuel Mpengwa, or Justice Minister Emerson Mnangagwa, the steely crocodile with a reputation for intelligence-driven purges, Mujuru advocated restraint. He met discreetly with Western diplomats, leaked in U.S. embassy cables, urging economic stabilization over confrontation and a softening of the ruinous Indigenization and Economic Empowerment Act, which demanded foreign companies hand over majority stakes to black Zimbabweans. For the hardliners, this moderation was a policy threat. In ZANU-PF's Politburo, his baritone commanded silence. He alone could stare down Mugabe during heated sessions, his war scars a silent rebuke to the aging leader's intransigence. Mujuru's influence was rooted not only in history but in current power. He controlled a massive network of war veterans, provincial chairpersons, and parliamentary deputies, a sophisticated faction nicknamed the Gamatox faction. Yet it was his wife who crystallized the threat. Joyce Mujuru had joined ZANLA at 18, earning her nom de guerre Spill Blood. Her marriage to Mujuru in 1977 fused two liberation icons, birthing a dynasty. As vice president, Joyce championed subtle reforms and positioned herself as a unifying figure. But beneath this, the Mujurus plotted succession. Mugabe, 87 in 2011 and frail, clung to power like a drowning man to driftwood. Mujuru backed Joyce as heir apparent, leveraging his military networks to sway provincial structures. His growing dissatisfaction with Mugabe's increasingly autocratic and economically disastrous rule was public knowledge. A key turning point came during the 2008 elections, where it was widely believed that Mujuru's faction, fearing Mugabe's potential loss and the subsequent consequences for the party, instructed their supporters to participate in Bora Musango, voting for ZANU-PF parliamentary candidates but against Mugabe in the presidential ballot. This act of internal sabotage proved the depth of the generals' rivalry with the aging president. By 2010, the existential stakes were clear. Mujuru clashed publicly with Mnangagwa over control of resources, but the primary tension lay in ideology. Hardliners, coalescing into the rival Lacoste faction and the emerging G40, backed by Grace Mugabe, the president's ambitious wife, viewed a Mujuru-led transition as a catastrophe. They feared that Joyce would dismantle the securocrats' patronage networks, reverse the most predatory elements of the land and indigenization policies that enriched them, and potentially allow for accountability for Gukurahundi and other human rights abuses. Mujuru, the man who put Mugabe in power, had become the only lethal internal threat capable of dethroning him through legitimate political maneuver. The year 2011 dawned with omens. ZANU-PF's Harare province, a Mujuru stronghold, defied central directives, endorsing Joyce's ascent. Mujuru hosted war veterans at Alamine Farm, his 3,000-hectare oasis of maize and cattle, where he railed against Mafia Mafikizalos, nouveau riche ZANU-PF upstarts. Bob must step down, he confided to allies like Didymus Mutasa, Mugabe's erstwhile enforcer turned reformist. The old man has overstayed. Joyce will heal this nation. These words rippled to the State House. Mugabe, insulated by grace and securocrats, seethed. Chimurenga, the army chief and Mnangagwa's ally, monitored Mujuru's movements via Central Intelligence Organization, CIO, tails. Mujuru's stolen keys from his Harare mansion in June symbolized the rising paranoia. The noose was tightening, signifying the state apparatus was already mobilized against him. The afternoon of August 15, 2011, unfolded with deceptive calm, but for Solomon Mujuru, it carried the weight of unspoken farewells. After spending the morning with his wife Joyce and then attending a cricket match at Harare Sports Club, the general headed to his farm, Alamine, in Beatrice. The drive wound through the savannah, past war-scarred hills, Mujuru sipping from a flask, replaying succession chess. Mugabe's silence on his retirement was damning. Mujuru had publicly urged him to hand over the baton. The words had stung. Grace's eyes, across the table, promised retribution. Arriving at Alamine around 7 p.m., Mujuru dismissed his driver, Godfrey. Dinner was simple. Sadza and relish by lantern light, washed with chivas. By 9 p.m., he retreated to the main house, a modest bungalow unbarred by security grills. A warrior's oversight born of decades of trust in his own security instincts. Phone calls trickled, Mutasa confirming Joyce's rally success, a war vet pledging delegates for the December conference. The clock struck 11 p.m. when the first anomaly pierced the night. Joseph Mwale, the night watchman, reported hearing muffled pops, too, like suppressed gunfire, from the homestead. Rosemary Shodi, the maid, stirred at similar thuds. Despite the alarms, neither acted immediately, a sign of the profound fear and deference to the powerful general solitude that permeated ZANU-PF's internal dynamics. What is certain? The attack was calculated and professionally executed. Intruders breached the unlocked door, shadows in CIO fatigues, armed with pistols and accelerants. A scuffle ensued, and gunshots silenced his struggle, as forensic evidence later suggested. He was bound, possibly gagged, shot in the torso, and then doused in petrol, the trail leading to the kitchen where a match ignited the blaze. Flames erupted at midnight, devouring curtains and beams with unnatural ferocity. Mujuru's body, slumped near the exit, was charred beyond recognition. By morning, August 16th, the Herald proclaimed, Gen Mujuru dies in farm fire. State media immediately spun accident as electrical fault, they said, but suspicions ignited faster than the blaze. Joyce, eyes hollow, demanded an autopsy. The inquest, launched in January 2012, was widely viewed as a state-managed exercise in obfuscation, designed to produce a predetermined outcome. Coroner Herbert Chitepo, nephew of the assassinated ZANU leader, ruled accidental death, smoke inhalation, no foul play. Crucially, the proceedings exposed a string of undeniable discrepancies and state failures. Shodi, the maid, initially spoke of gunshots but recanted under immense pressure. The watchman, Mwale, testified that he did not see the general enter the house, nor did he see the fire start, despite being on duty, suggesting potential coercion or selective testimony. Mujuru's body was found face down near the door in a slouched position, not in the bed, suggesting a struggle or an attempt to escape. Furthermore, journalists noted an unburnt rug beneath the corpse, inconsistent with a fire that had completely destroyed the roof and furniture. The implication was that the body was already deceased or incapacitated before the accelerant-fueled fire took hold. Rex Nhongo's elimination, therefore, was not merely an act of political violence, but a watershed moment that fundamentally changed the trajectory of Zimbabwean politics. His removal paved the way for the total consolidation of power by the Securocrats. This consolidation later allowed for the November 2017 military coup, led by Chiwenga and Mnangagwa, which finally ended Mugabe's 37-year rule. While Mujuru died opposing Mugabe, his forced exit ultimately ensured that the man he helped install was replaced by the hardliners he fought against, dooming Zimbabwe to continued factional rot and instability. In that Beatrice blaze, the nation lost its great bridge builder.